slides.
Thank you, Prime Minister. First slide, please. I'll start off with slides that people have seen before, the updates, but I think there is an important thing to point out on this slide, which is the very high spike on the very far right of this slide. And as the Prime Minister said, this is a record number of cases. I'm afraid we have to be realistic that records will be broken a lot over the next few weeks as the rates continue to go up. If you look at the overall rates, it looks as if Delta, which we've had with us for a while, is still flat, and the growth is Omicron. So what we've got is two epidemics on top of one another, an existing Delta epidemic, roughly flat, and a growing Omicron, very rapidly growing Omicron epidemic on top of it. Next slide, please. When it comes to hospitalizations, this really always, of course, reflects where we were two or more weeks ago, and therefore the rates have remained reasonably flat over quite a while, reflecting where we've been with Delta over the last several weeks. So rates are currently flat, but they are beginning to increase in some places, particularly in London. Next slide, please. And deaths, of course, reflect what happened even earlier in time. And those are still, if anything, going down very slightly. But this, of course, doesn't reflect anything in terms of Omicron because the emergence of Omicron and its spread is far too recent. Next slide, please. Dr. Kanani is going to talk more about the vaccination in a minute, but I just wanted to give a visual picture of the speed at which the initial rollout, that's in blue, the second dose, which is in orange, and now the booster rollout is occurring in red. And as you can see, it's going up very rapidly and accelerating, and that will continue to happen over the next period of time. Next slide, please. When I showed this slide at the last session, people said they wanted a bit more time on it, and I want to make 2 points on it. What this shows is what the hospitalization rates and different age groups, where in the dark bars are people who are not vaccinated, and the orange bars are the people who are vaccinated with 2 doses. First point, this provides massive amounts of protection against hospitalization against Delta. This is what we're showing. But what we're expecting to happen with Omicron is that some of that difference is going to be eroded because it is the vaccines are less well matched to the Omicron variant. This is what the laboratory data are implying. We don't have clear clinical data yet. And therefore, the point of the booster is to try and get people back to as good a position in terms of replicating this really good protection after they've had their booster dose. It will additionally provide protection against Delta and other variants. So that is really what we're aiming to do. But this is, when people say, do vaccines work? I really do think if people look at these data, they cannot really argue, except that vaccines are remarkable at working. But people do still go into hospital even when they're double vaccinated, and they will still go into hospital even after boosters. But their risks are much reduced. Next slide, please. Now moving on to Omicron. And what I'm showing here is a screening test for Omicron. These aren't genotype things. This is what's called S-gene target failure, but now any S-gene target failure pretty well represents an Omicron case. And the reason we're showing this is you get these data earlier than you get the data from the full genotyping. So it's more up to date. Now, I'd like to point out 2 things with this. The first of which is the count of numbers is now going up very fast. I'd like to point out also that the greyed out bars, those data are incomplete and will increase. Again, I saw some commentary that said, that shows it's going away next time. The last bits of data, and the same is true in the UK, it's also true incidentally in South Africa, the last bits of data will always increase as new data comes in. But both the numbers, but also the percentage of cases is steadily rising. So an increasing percentage of all of our cases is now Omicron. But that's not because Delta's going away, it's because Omicron's being built on top of that. Next slide, please. The final slide I wanted to show is really just to show that this is happening across the whole of England. It is also happening very clearly in Scotland and beginning to happen in Wales and Northern Ireland. But these are data from England. In London now, the majority of cases in London are going to be Omicron. And therefore, that is going to be where we will be from the time we get to probably Christmas onwards. I would expect most cases going to hospital to start to be Omicron cases. I would like to make one final point before I hand on over to Dr. Kanani, which is I think that there has been a certain amount of commentary about the fact that doctors and scientists from South Africa, and I really want to pay huge tribute to South African